Hello and welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because Bitcoin is on the verge of printing its largest monthly candle ever as price crosses 99K. We also have MicroStrategy completing another $3 billion raise to buy more Bitcoin, and we have the US Bitcoin ETF assets breaking the major milestone of $100 billion in AUM. And this is when it's more important than ever to remain calm and not be too attached to one outcome, even if price structure tells us Bitcoin is likely going to go higher in the short term. We have to be open to the possibility of pullbacks, but this is easier said than done because current sentiment is in full-blown extreme greed. And this can carry on for a few weeks, but I really don't blame people when you look at the type of headlines the media is publishing. We have the Charles Schwab incoming CEO saying he did not buy any crypto and he feels silly for not buying any. We have the SEC chair Gary Gensler, who has been absolutely terrible for the space, announcing that he's going to retire on the day of Trump's inauguration, January 20th, 2025. We have the UK announcing that they're ready to deliver a comprehensive crypto regulation framework. I don't know where they've been over the past decade, but apparently in early 2025 they're going to do so. We're seeing similar sentiment from Shanghai. Now they're saying that cryptocurrencies are a commodity and all of a sudden they are legal to own, even though supposedly they've been illegal for a decade. They've decided that now is the time to make them legal. And of course, this is when all of the big adoption headlines start to pop up. We have MasterCard, one of the largest payment processors in the world, along with JP Morgan, the largest bank in the world, now announcing they're going to integrate blockchain payment solutions. We're seeing all type of companies coming out of the woodwork and announcing they're going to raise debt to borrow Bitcoin and follow the MicroStrategy playbook. So it's no surprise that sentiment is through the roof and you have people talking about Bitcoin's teleportation through 100K, and you see record stablecoin inflows as people pile into this market, and you see a lot of call option buying on these new ETF options where people are using small amounts of money to bet on these huge Bitcoin prices over the next few months. But we have to realize that we have already had an incredible few weeks with three $10,000 weekly candles in a row, and nobody ever talks about the other side of the coin and the fact that Bitcoin long-term holders are slowly speeding up their profit taking and selling at current prices. Now, one thing I realized in previous cycles is that nobody talks about on-chain when it says anything bearish, and they only talk about the bullish aspects of on-chain. But you can see clearly here that long-term holders have been taking profits recently, just like they did in March. And so far that has been getting absorbed by the ETFs. And you can see that here we have the ETF inflows increasing in blue, while long-term holder sell side is increasing. And we peaked in March because those long-term holders started to outpace those ETF inflows. And as of right now, they're kind of in an equilibrium and the demand is outpacing the supply, especially with the help of the buying coming from MicroStrategy and its consistent debt raises to buy more Bitcoin. But what we have to realize here is that long-term holders are sitting on a ton of unrealized gains, and perhaps they're not selling a lot quite yet, kind of similar to what we saw in the blow-off move in 2021. And the reason for this is because there's always a new narrative to stop longer-term holders from selling. In 2021, we had all of the excitement with the price discovery breakout and Tesla putting Bitcoin on its balance sheet. And all of a sudden, everybody was talking about all other companies following that playbook, and everybody was targeting 100K. And then in 2021, we had El Salvador putting some Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and all of a sudden, everybody was euphoric, saying that all of Latin America was going to follow. Brazil, Argentina, everybody was going to start putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and everybody was targeting 100K yet again. In March, we had the narrative of the ETFs going live and everybody talking about 100K Bitcoin before the halving, so everybody kept sitting on those realized gains and didn't start locking them in until later. And of course, today we have the election outcome, we have the US Strategic Reserve, we have the nation state FOMO narrative. The Middle East is going to buy up all of the Bitcoin. Why would you ever sell your Bitcoin below $1 million? And all of those narratives that always come up alongside the bullish headlines to stop people from taking any profits. And of course, because hodling is not enough, people end up taking on massive amounts of leverage to take advantage of that greed and FOMO and upside potential. And that's usually what results in the eventual correction and pullback. And this is why markets go through constant cycles of extreme fear and extreme greed. Everybody gets incredibly greedy and takes on too much risk at high prices, and everybody panic sells and gets incredibly scared. And all of the headlines and narratives are always bearish at low and cheap prices. So for me, I prefer a time-based approach. I think Bitcoin can continue this rally for the next few months, and there will be corrections along the way, but I do expect a top around the March to April timeframe because we are already so ahead of schedule. And usually once you start seeing these huge green candles like we saw going into the March top, like we saw going into the November 2021 top, like we saw going into the February 2021 top, you see these huge moves towards the end of the cycle and not at the beginning. And that's why it's important to have a plan and not just keep raising your price targets based on what the media and your favorite YouTubers are promising you. And when I first published this chart in May of this year and started talking about it on this channel, people thought it was insane to talk about a 90K Bitcoin in 2024, especially because under 2 years ago, we were able to buy Bitcoin below 20K and below 30K, and we had a ton of time last year to buy Bitcoin below 50K. And then we had another 6 months to accumulate Bitcoin below 70K. So to teleport to above 90K in just 3 weeks. And now everybody's saying that 90K is just the beginning. The target is 500K this cycle. But for me, I have to stick to my initial plan. When I see extreme greed for over a week in a row, I just slowly trim off some profits and lock in some gains because of positions that were purchased significantly lower. So for me, I know that I just have to follow my plan and ignore what the current narratives are and what mainstream media is saying. And when I see extreme greed, I like to slowly take very small profits each and every week and move that into cash and lock those profits in. That way, if Bitcoin continues significantly higher, I can still take advantage of that with 75% of my holdings. But if we do end up seeing a large reversal, I'm not going to be a deer in headlights just praying for prices to recover because I took on too much leverage or because I took absolutely no profits on the way up. And speaking of profits, I know these percentages are boring for people in this industry, but Bitcoin at its size up over 100% on the year, as well as Solana being up almost 130%. Is really good gains in my opinion to at least lock in a tiny bit of it. And even though Ethereum has continued to lag, I still have hopes that it'll eventually have a move at some point, but I will still slowly sell off some Ethereum as time progresses as well, because if we do see a large correction for Bitcoin eventually, it likely drags Ethereum down with it. And all we need for Ethereum to put in some nice moves is some strong narratives to develop, kind of like what's been happening with Solana, which briefly put in an all-time high above its 2021 peak just this morning. And this is an incredible story to think that Solana peaked at 260 in November of 2021, bottomed around $15 or $10 in November of 2022, and even got as low as $8 in January of 2023. And here we are 2 years later, back at previous all-time highs, and that's what having a good narrative does. We're seeing a lot of meme coin speculation on Solana, and we're seeing a lot of excitement that now with Gary Gensler stepping down and with a more pro-crypto regulatory framework, we could see a Solana ETF. And of course, the elephant in the room, the US dollar index is still trading higher into the risk-off zone. Bitcoin continues to ignore it for now, but I don't think that will continue much longer. And I do think we're going to see some volatility in traditional markets pretty soon if the dollar index continues rallying. And of course, this dollar index strength is coming in from the market pricing in less and less rate cuts as the economy continues to look fine in terms of the labor market. The likelihood of QE starting anytime soon while the Fed is keeping rates higher for longer is still quite unlikely, which puts downward pressure on global liquidity because the dollar is the global reserve asset. So a strong dollar means lower global liquidity. And usually Bitcoin needs those global liquidity increases for those mania phases. Bitcoin has been able to ignore that recently with all of the excitement surrounding the election outcome, but we do want to see global liquidity turn higher if we're going to have an extended multi-month bull market and mania phase. So for now, it looks like the dollar index wants to rally into the end of the year, then roll over, but we'll continue monitoring that slowly. And we're still waiting for the start of alt season that will most likely coincide with that dollar index rollover. Altcoins have been doing okay recently, but they're still underperforming Bitcoin aside from a few names. And we likely need to see that dollar index roll over and that QE restart, sending global liquidity higher for alt season to really kick off. As for traditional markets, decent week for the S&P 500, slightly going higher here, which is a great backdrop for Bitcoin. If the S&P 500 can enter price discovery once again, that likely could allow Bitcoin to continue rallying higher in the short term and have the strength to break above 100,000. And I'm still closely monitoring this Tether dominance trend line. It has broken below the trend line for now, but we have seen wicks below it in the past. We want to see where this ends up closing, because this breaking to the downside could be a positive sign for the next few weeks of price action, especially because the Tether supply keeps increasing. This is the increase over the past month, going from about 120 billion all the way to 130 billion in just under 3 weeks. And as long as Tether supply increases, it can maintain the same percentages while crypto prices go up as well. So we'll continue to monitor this over the next few weeks. As for the macro data, I like to cover this and keep an eye on it once a week. Inflation is still heading in the right direction, even though core CPI is still a bit stubborn at over 3%, but we're still seeing positive signs in the labor market. Another new local low on initial jobless claims. We're not seeing any layoffs just yet. Nothing scary in continuing jobless claims either. We're waiting for the upcoming non-farm payroll and unemployment rate print to see what the market thinks of the latest labor data. But until that actually ends up happening, I'm not seeing any concerning signs for the inflation data or labor market data. And of course, the labor market strength is likely driven quite a bit by the national deficits being run by the federal government, because we're running recessionary deficits outside of a recession to keep the economy afloat. And this just means more government debt, and eventually that debt will get monetized. So that means more money supply and more global liquidity, which is why we remain bullish on risk assets like the S&P 500 and fixed supply risk assets like Bitcoin. But it's definitely been an incredible few weeks. Let's see if Bitcoin can continue this rally higher. And for now, my plan is just to slowly pay myself along the way as long as the market is greedy, just locking in very small profits here and there, so I get to take advantage of this upside and still let the majority of my positions ride towards hopefully higher prices. But anyway, let me know what you expect. Are you euphoric after these last 3 weeks of $10,000 candles? Or do you still think we're just getting started and we're going a lot higher than here in the short term? Would love to know what you expect. As always, thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.